The Tokugawa Shogunate, also known as the Tokugawa Bakufu and the Edo Bakufu, was the last feudal Japanese military government which existed between 1603 and 1867. The heads of government were the Shoguns, and each was a member of the Tokugawa clan. The Tokugawa Shogunate ruled from Edo Castle, and the years of the shogunate became known as the Edo period. This time is also called the Tokugawa period or pre-modern. History. Following the Sengoku period of warring states, the central government had been largely re-established by Oda Nobunaga during the Azuchi Momoyama period. After the Battle of Sekigahara in 1600, central authority fell to Tokugawa Ieyasu. Society in the Tokugawa period, unlike the shogunates before it, was supposedly based on the strict class hierarchy originally established by Toyotomi Hideyoshi. The daimyo, or lords, were at the top, followed by the warrior caste of samurai, with the farmers, artisans, and traders ranking below. In some parts of the country, particularly smaller regions, daimyo and samurai were more or less identical, since daimyo might be trained as samurai, and samurai might act as local rulers. Otherwise, the largely inflexible nature of this social stratification system unleashed disruptive forces over time. Taxes on the peasantry were set at fixed amounts which did not account for inflation or other changes in monetary value. As a result, the tax revenues collected by the samurai landowners were worth less and less over time. This often led to numerous confrontations between noble but impoverished samurai and well-to-do peasants, ranging from simple local disturbances to much bigger rebellions. None, however, proved compelling enough to seriously challenge the established order until the arrival of foreign powers. In the mid-19th century, an alliance of several of the more powerful daimyo, along with the titular emperor, finally succeeded in the overthrow of the shogunate after the Boshin War, culminating in the Meiji Restoration. The Tokugawa shogunate came to an official end in 1868 with the resignation of the 15th Tokugawa shogun Tokugawa Yoshinobu, leading to the restoration of imperial rule, notwithstanding its eventual overthrow in favor of the more modernized, less feudal form of governance of the Meiji Restoration. The Tokugawa shogunate oversaw the longest period of peace and stability in Japan's history, lasting well over 250 years. Government. Shogunate and domains. The Bakuhan Taizei was the feudal political system in the Edo period of Japan. Baku, or tent, is an abbreviation of bakufu, meaning military government, that is, the shogunate. The Han were the domains headed by daimyo. Vassals held inherited lands and provided military service and homage to their lords. The Bakuhan Taizei split feudal power between the shogunate in Edo and provincial domains throughout Japan. Provinces had a degree of sovereignty and were allowed an independent administration of the Han in exchange for loyalty to the shogun, who was responsible for foreign relations and national security. The shogun and lords were all daimyo, feudal lords with their own bureaucracies, policies, and territories. The shogun also administered the most powerful Han, the hereditary fief of the House of Tokugawa. Each level of government administered its own system of taxation. The shogun had the military power of Japan and was more powerful than the emperor, who was titularly a religious leader. The shogunate had the power to discard, annex, and transform domains. The Sankan-Kotai system of alternative residence required each daimyo would reside in alternate years between the Han and attendants in Edo. In their absence from Edo, it was also required that they leave family as hostages until their return. The huge expenditure Sankan-Kotai imposed on each Han helped centralize aristocratic alliances and ensured loyalty to the shogun, as each representative doubled as a potential hostage. Tokugawa's descendants further ensured loyalty by maintaining a dogmatic insistence on loyalty to the shogun. Feudal daimyo were hereditary vassals of Ieyasu, as well as of his descendants. Tozama, or outsiders, became vassals of Ieyasu after the Battle of Sekigahara. Shinpan, or relatives, were collaterals of Tokugawa Hidetada. Early in the Edo period, the shogunate viewed the Tozama as the least likely to be loyal. Over time, strategic marriages and the entrenchment of the system made the Tozama less likely to rebel. In the end, it was the great Tozama of Satsuma, Choshu and Tosa, and to a lesser extent Heisen, that brought down the shogunate. These four states are called the Four Western Clans, or Sachotoi for short. The number of han fluctuated throughout the Edo period. They were ranked by size, which was measured as the number of koku that the domain produced each year. 1 koku was the amount of rice necessary to feed one adult male for 1 year. The minimum number for a daimyo was 10,000 koku. The largest, apart from the shogun, was 1,000,000. Shogun and the emperor. Despite the establishment of the shogunate, the emperor in Kyoto was still the legitimate ruler of Japan. Regardless of the political title of the emperor, the shoguns of the Tokugawa family controlled Japan. The administration of Japan was a task given by the imperial court in Kyoto to the Tokugawa family, which they returned to the court in the Meiji Restoration. While the emperor had the prerogative of appointing the shogun, he had virtually no say in state affairs. The shogunate appointed a liaison, the Kyoto Shoshidai, to deal with the emperor, court and nobility. Towards the end of the shogunate, however, after centuries of the emperor having very little say in state affairs and being secluded in his Kyoto palace, and in the wake of the reigning shogun, Tokugawa Iemochi, marrying the sister of Emperor Kome, in 1862, the imperial court in Kyoto began to enjoy increased political influence. The emperor would occasionally be consulted on various policies, and the shogun even made a visit to Kyoto to visit the emperor. Shogun and foreign trade. Foreign affairs and trade were monopolized by the shogunate, yielding a huge profit. Foreign trade was also permitted to the Satsuma and the Tsushima domains. Rice was the main trading product of Japan during this time. Isolationism was the foreign policy of Japan, and trade was strictly controlled. Merchants were outsiders to the social hierarchy of Japan and were thought to be greedy. The visits of the Nanbun ships from Portugal were, at first, the main vector of trade exchanges, followed by the addition of Dutch, English and sometimes Spanish ships. From 1603 onward, Japan started to participate actively in foreign trade. In 1615, an embassy and trade mission under Hasekura Tsunenaga was sent across the Pacific to Nueva España on the Japanese-built galleon San Juan Bautista. Until 1635, the shogun issued numerous permits for the so-called Red Seal ships, destined for the Asian trade. After 1635 and the introduction of seclusion laws, inbound ships were only allowed from China, Korea, and the Netherlands. Shogun and Christianity. Followers of Christianity first began appearing in Japan during the 16th century. Oda Nobunaga, however, embraced Christianity and the Western technology that was imported with it, such as the musket. He also saw it as a tool he could use to suppress Buddhist forces. Though Christianity was allowed to grow until the 1610s, Tokugawa Ieyasu soon began to see it as a growing threat to the stability of the shogunate. As Ogosho, he influenced the implementing of laws that banned the practice of Christianity. His successors followed suit, compounding upon Ieyasu's laws. The ban of Christianity is often linked with the creation of the seclusion laws, or sakoku, in the 1630s. Institutions of the shogunate. Roju and Wakadoshi Yori. The Roju were the senior members of the shogunate. They supervised the Ometsuki, Makibugyo, Ongokubugyo and other officials, oversaw relations with the imperial court in Kyoto, Kuga, daimyo, Buddhist temples and Shinto shrines, and attended to matters like divisions of fiefs. Normally, 4 or 5 men held the office, and one was on duty for a month at a time on a rotating basis. They conferred on especially important matters. In the administrative reforms of 1867, the office was eliminated in favor of a bureaucratic system with ministers for the interior, finance, foreign relations, army, and navy. In principle, the requirements for appointment to the office of Roju were to be a feudal daimyo and to have a fief assessed at 50,000 koku or more. However, there were exceptions to both criteria. Many appointees came from the offices close to the shogun, such as Soba Yonan, Kyoto Shoshidai, and Osaka Jodai. Irregularly, the shoguns appointed a Roju to the position of Taro. The office was limited to members of the Sakai, Doi, and Hotta clans, but Yanagi Sawai Yoshiyasu was given the status of Taro as well. Among the most famous was Inosuke, who was assassinated in 1860 outside the Sakuradamon gate of Edo Castle. The Wakadoshi-yori were next in status below the Roju, an outgrowth of the early six-man Rokunanshu. The office took its name and final form in 1662, but with 4 members. Their primary responsibility was management of the affairs of the Hatamoto and Gokunin, the direct vassals of the shogun. Some shoguns appointed a Soba Yonan. This person acted as a liaison between the shogun and the Roju. The Soba Yonan increased in importance during the time of the 5th shogun Tokugawa Tsunayoshi, when a Wakadoshi-yori, Inaba Masayasu, assassinated Hotta Masatoshi, the Daro. Fearing for his personal safety, Tsunayoshi moved the Roju to a more distant part of the castle. Some of the most famous Soba Yonan were Yanagi Sawai Yoshiyasu and Tanimura Kitsugu. Ometsuki and Metsuki. The Ometsuki and Metsuki were officials who reported to the Roju and Wakadoshi-yori. The 5 Ometsuki were in charge of monitoring the affairs of the daimyo, Kuga and imperial court. They were in charge of discovering any threat of rebellion. Early in the Edo period, daimyo such as Yagu Munfuyu held the office. Soon, however, it fell to Hatamoto with rankings of 5,000 koku or more. To give them authority in their dealings with daimyo, they were often ranked at 10,000 koku and given the title of kami such as Bizen no Kami. As time progressed, the function of the Ometsuki evolved into one of passing orders from the shogunate to the daimyo, and of administering to ceremonies within Edo Castle. They also took on additional responsibilities such as supervising religious affairs and controlling firearms. The Metsuki, reporting to the Wakadoshi-yori, oversaw the affairs of the vassals of the shogun. They were the police force for the thousands of Hatamoto and Gokunin who were concentrated in Edo. Individual Han had their own Metsuki who similarly policed their samurai. Sanbugyo. The Sanbugyo were the Jisha, Kanjo, and Machibugyo, which oversaw temples and shrines, accounting, and the cities, respectively. The Jisha Bugyo had the highest status of the 3. They oversaw the administration of Buddhist temples and Shinto shrines, many of which held fiefs. Also, they heard lawsuits from several land holdings outside the 8 Kanta provinces. The appointments normally went to daimyo. Oka Tadasuke was an exception, though he later became a daimyo. The Kanjo Bugyo were next in status. The 4 holders of this office reported to the Roju. They were responsible for the finances of the shogunate. The Machibugyo were the chief city administrators of Edo and other cities. Their roles included mayor, chief of the police, and judge in criminal and civil matters not involving samurai. 2 men, normally Hatamoto, held the office, and alternated by month. 3 Edo Machibugyo have become famous through Jidegeki. Oka Tadasuke and Toyama Kagemoto as heroes, and Toriyayozo as a villain. Tenryou Gundai and Daikon the Sanbugyo together sat on a council called the Hyojosho. In this capacity, they were responsible for administering the Tenryou, supervising the Gundai, the Daikon and the Karabugyo, as well as hearing cases involving samurai. The shogun directly held lands in various parts of Japan. These were known as shihaisho. Since the Meiji period, the term tenryou has become synonymous. In addition to the territory that Ieyasu held prior to the Battle of Sekigahara, this included lands he gained in that battle and lands gained as a result of the summer and winter sieges of Osaka. By the end of the 17th century, the shogun's land holdings had reached 4 million koku. Such major cities as Nagasaki and Osaka, and mines, including the Sado gold mine, also fell into this category. Gaikoku Bugyo. The Gaikoku Bugyo were administrators appointed between 1858 and 1868. They were charged with overseeing trade and diplomatic relations with foreign countries, and were based in the treaty ports of Nagasaki and Kanagawa. Late Tokugawa Shogunate. The late Tokugawa Shogunate was the period between 1853 and 1867, during which Japan ended its isolationist foreign policy called Sakoku and modernized from a feudal shogunate to the Meiji government. It is at the end of the Edo period and preceded the Meiji era. The major ideological and political factions during this period were divided into the pro-imperialist Isshin Shishi and the shogunate forces, including the elite Shinzengumi swordsmen. Although these two groups were the most visible powers, many other factions attempted to use the chaos of the Bakumatsu era to seize personal power. Furthermore, there were two other main driving forces for dissent: first, growing resentment of Tozama Daimyo, and second, growing anti-Western sentiment following the arrival of Matthew C. Perry. The first related to those lords who had fought against Tokugawa forces at Sekigahara and had from that point on been exiled permanently from powerful positions within the shogunate. The second was to be expressed in the phrase "Sono joy," or "revere the emperor, expel the barbarians." The turning points of the Bakumatsu were the Boshin War and the Battle of Toba Fushimi, when pro-shogunate forces were defeated. List of the Tokugawa shoguns. Over the course of the Edo period, influential relatives of the shogun included Tokugawa Mitsukuni of the Mito domain, Tokugawa Nariaki of the Mito domain, Tokugawa Mochiharu of the Hitotsubashi branch, Tokugawa Moontake of the Tayasu branch, Matsudera Katamori of the Aizu branch, Matsudera Sadanobu, born into the Tayasu branch, adopted into the Hisamatsu Matsudera of Shirakawa.